Hi guys, my name is Meg and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be dyeing a Superwash Merino wool in both a tonal and a matching speckled colorway. So today I have something really special planned. We're going to be dyeing yarn today, and I thought that I would show you how I dye a tonal colorway versus a speckled colorway. So the colors are going to be intended to work together and pair together, but we should be able to highlight the two different dyeing techniques. So let's get to it. My pans have been heating for about a half hour, so they're super hot. When I dye yarn, I prefer to work with high heat. I feel that I get much sharper, vibrant colors. The dye is going to strike very fast. So I just need to get my safety gear on. You should always wear gloves. You know, dyes, while they are advertised as non-toxic, dye is still not good on your skin or to inhale. It's color, you know, I don't need to go into, you know, dyes in food are not good, so we don't need to expose ourselves to dyes. So I wear my gloves, and then I also always wear a respirator whenever I'm dealing with dry dye powder. I got this from Home Depot. It's one that I think it's meant for like spray painting, so it guards against both liquid droplets as well as particles. So it is like N95 rated, but it's a little bit more intense than just your standard N95 mask. If you didn't have a respirator handy to you, because they do tend to be kind of hard to find even now in hardware stores, I would at least wear an N95 mask and make sure that it's fully fitted to your face. Again, the dyes are not necessarily toxic, but they are very fine powders, and breathing them regularly over a period of time, you can start developing some sensitivities to it. And so, you know, be safe, wear a mask. Okay, so in the pans, I've got two pans going today. And today we are dyeing, dropping my yarn behind me. Today we are dyeing two different batches of my Folk Song yarn. Folk Song is a 100% superwash wool, and it's an Aran weight. Aran weight is just a little bit plumpier than a worsted weight, but it's not quite a bulky. I really prefer it over worsted weight because you get just like a nicer, denser fabric. I'm currently working on a sweater in my Folk Song. This is not the color I'm going to be dyeing today, but just to give you an example of what the fabric looks like. I know this is a tiny piece and it's not blocked, but you get a really nice, dense, squishy fabric that I think has just the right amount of structure without it being too stiff, but it's gonna sit really nicely. So this tiny piece of fabric is part of a test knit that I am doing for JP Knits. It's a pattern that's coming out in January, so I'm sure if you stay tuned to future episodes, you'll hear more about that. But today we are going to be working on my two colors that I've actually had in the shop for a little while. They're my favorites. They're very popular. I love dyeing them. I love using them. So for our tonal colorway, we're going to be dyeing When the Curtain Hits the Cast. It is a deep, steely navy blue. It's very dark, but when it's knit up, it does have a lot of tonal variety to it that I just love. And its pair for today is called Sam Patch. And this is a really fun colorway. It features some of the same blue that I use in When the Curtain Hits the Cast, as well as a pop of really bright colors. The blue is dominant in this, so when you do knit or crochet this up, it is going to look more like a blue colorway. And then all those little bright pops just kind of blend into the fabric. It's really fun. They go so great together. What I'm showing you right now is actually on my BFL sock base. And so we're going to do the same colors, just on Aran weight. So I'm going to actually start with the sand patch. So how I do my speckles is I like to add one color at a time and let it heat for a while before I add my next color. So I'm going to go ahead and put my respirator on, and we're going to add our speckle. And I'm actually going to flip these pans. So I set up a camera, so hopefully, you know, still learning my tech and whatnot, I was hopeful that with a second camera here, I would give you guys a nice pan shot. But I set it up, I have 5 skeins in this pan, and I wanted to do 5 skeins on sand patch. So I think I'm going to switch these because the magic is in the speckling. And I'm going to surmise that that is what you guys want to see, because that is what I would want to see. So all right. Okay, so now I am going to put my mask on. Okay, so I got my first layer on here. This color is, I think, displays exactly why I love speckling yarn so very much. So this is called Periwinkle. It's by Jacquard. It's an acid dye, meaning that it needs acid for the dye to bond to the protein fiber. But what's really cool about this is, you know, colors, if you think about, you know, how you mix paints, you have your primary colors, and you mix your primary colors to get your secondary and tertiary colors. Well, it's the same thing with dye. Different dye molecules are added together, different colors, I should say, are added together to create these colors. So oftentimes, like what happened with this color, when you speckle with it, you actually get what's called the dye breaking, in that you get a speckle of all the individual colors that actually go up to make this mix. So if I were to mix this up into water, it would be a very, you know, periwinkle, somewhere in between a blue, not quite a purple, somewhere in there. But when you speckle it, you can see blue is that dominant color, but there's red in this dye, and I love how it comes out all separate, and you get all these really, really fun individual colors. That's just so unique. I love speckles. It excites me. So I'm just going to put the lid on this guy just so that it gets nice and hot. I want my speckles to stay crisp, so the faster that the speckles strike, the more crisp and small the speckles are going to stay. The longer it takes for them to strike, that's when the dye is going to start spreading out into the water, and you'll get more of a watercolor wash effect rather than a very sharp speckle. So I want my pan to stay nice and hot. High heat is one of the ingredients that you need to have nice, sharp, crisp color. You want acidified water. I use citric acid as my acid, and then heat. So, did I not bring my dye out here? Hold on. Okay, so for our tonal colorway, we're going to be not using dry powder, but we're going to be using dye mixes. So these I've pre-mixed for us. I have 2 different blue colors that I've mixed up. And again, this is going to be really, really dark, so there's a lot of dye in these colors. Let's see here, I slopped a bit. So when I dye my tonals, I like to add my dye directly to the pan and then rest the yarn back on it. So you get a bit of like a kettle dye effect. So I'm just going to add just an eyeball, about half of this first color. This is just a very nice deep dark navy blue. And then I'm just going to lay this down into it. So it's going to strike a little unevenly, which I want because I prefer tonal colors rather than two true solid colors. So I'm just going to let that sit. And I'm going to put the top on just to keep things nice and hot. And let's check on things over here. So one of the tests that I like to do is just with my glove. It's why I like wearing the white gloves, is I just do a little finger test, and if dye comes back on my fingers, it's not ready. But if the dye does not, then it means that it is actually fully fixed and attached to the yarn, and it is. So we can go ahead and add our next color. I'm going to pick this up and flip it around. I prefer my colors to be a bit more evenly distributed on the skeins. So I do a lot of flipping so that I can get colors on both sides. So now I just flip it over. I'm just gonna push it back into the water with my tongs. And let's go ahead and speckle with our next color. So my next color is actually going to be quite opposite of the blue that we did. My next color is going to be a nice peach color, where I'm going to get these just little subtle pops of peach. I think it pairs really nicely with those little purpley red spots that have popped through in our last color. Okay, so I'm going to let that sit for about 5-10 minutes at least. And I also find that generally the more colors that I start to add, the longer it's going to take for the dye to exhaust and fix, simply because the more dye you have, you're creating layers. There just is not enough room. There's not enough receptors for those dye molecules to adhere to the protein fiber. So usually that first speckle you can get away with 5 minutes. That next speckle is going to take 10 minutes. The next one, 15 minutes. So I'm just going to set the timer on my phone for 10 minutes and I will be right back. Okay, so it's been about 10-15 minutes, so let's see what progress we've been making. Ooh. It came out very peach. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a flip again. And this time when I do it, I'm actually going to like mix up the skeins so that the ones that were on the, that was lovely. That was hot water all over my foot. So the skeins that were on the outside of the pan are now going to be on the inside. And that's just going to help keep things nice and even. Sometimes color can kind of bleed up the sides of the pan. So you'll find that if you don't rotate your skeins, that middle skein will always come out just a little bit later. So I keep them flipped and rotated as much as I can, and that will, again, ensure that there's consistency skein to skein. Generally, the more speckled a colorway is, the more difficult it is to get that skein to skein consistency, because it's all by hand. It is so much down here. I can't believe I just did that. So yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and speckle the next color. This color is really fun. It's a really bright, like frozen aqua color. And I really think it helps kind of lift that color. It gives it a bit of dimension so it doesn't look just like a flat blue. It's really fun. So especially once I'm getting to my second, third, fourth, fifth colors with speckling, I'm specifically looking for those bare areas. I don't want to necessarily just dump color on top of color, because you start to get some kind of brown and some muddying effects. So I am kind of specifically and intentionally going after those white spots or spots that look lighter that need a little bit more color. So let's take a look at our tonal pan. The color is pretty much 100% exhausted. That color is complete, or I should say that water is completely clear. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of, or all of, the second color. So this is just another blue. This one actually should be a bit more of a blue. You can see this blue is a very kind of gray blue, so here, I can show you this side of the skein. It almost looks like it's going to be gray. So it's another, like, trust me situation. It's not. It's going to be blue. This color is much more true blue. There's a lot of it, so it's dark. But it should be. And so again, I'm going to mix up these skeins. I gave it a really good dunk because I do want to get full coverage. While I want it to be tonal with some light spots, some dark spots, I do still need it to be all dark. I don't want any white spots or any like light blue spots. It needs to be pretty much like a medium denim blue to a deep, deep, deep blue. So gave it that dunk just to guarantee that everything is covered. And now I'm going to let it sit in the pan. I just added a ton of dye, so this is probably going to take probably a good half hour to exhaust. And I'm just trying to open up the skein so that as much yarn as possible is exposed. If you kind of keep it all together, like how it's a little bit more smushed in this pan, so I have 4 skeins in this pan, but 5 in this pan, so the yarn's a little bit more smushed, and I do that intentionally to preserve some of the white spots so the strands of yarn have a place to hide. With this, I don't want anybody hiding, because again, we want tonal, but we want everything dark blue. So I do a little bit less in the pan, spend some time to open it all up, and then I'll just let that, just washing out my little container. I want all the dye to be in there, so I'll just let that sit again pretty much until all of that dye is exhausted. I'm gonna guess it's about a half hour. Usually I'll check it after like 20 minutes or so, but yeah. So yeah, from here, we'll just let it sit and cook. If this This is actually the only yarn that I'm dyeing today, which is so unusual for me. But normally when I'm production dyeing, I have 6 pans going all at once. So, you know, and I have them kind of staggered, so while these 2 might be sitting, I'll move on to my next set of 2, my next set of 2, so I'm never really staying, you know, just stagnant or not really working, if that makes sense. But for today, it's just these 2. It's Saturday that I'm filming this. It's the Saturday actually before Thanksgiving, and I have some family coming over for the Thanksgiving holiday, so in my breaks I've been zipping upstairs to kind of clean up a little bit, so that's really nice. So I'm going to stop babbling, and I will be back probably in about a half an hour, and we'll check on things and see what we got. Well, welcome back. I think we are ready to keep going. On my last break, I actually caked up another cake for my sweater that I'm working on, so that was really good. Instead of cleaning my house, you know, just played with more yarn like you do. Nothing wrong with that. So let's keep going into the pans. So I'm gonna give this just a little test. It starts to get tricky because these pans are hot. Hot, hot, hot. So I am working with Superwash wool. And Superwash refers to a treatment that the wool goes under before it is spun, where the scales of the wool are smoothed down. And what that does is relaxes the wool and also makes it so that it's a little bit more heat tolerant and friction tolerant. So heat plus friction creates felting. So Superwash was basically invented by the clothing industry, I believe in the 80s, as a way to essentially make wool washable. Now I would say I still would not recommend washing your garments even though they're made with Superwash. And I mean, the reason that I say that is you spend a lot of time knitting or crocheting up this gorgeous garment and putting it into a machine. I mean, I don't know about you, but it just seems like anytime I put something into a machine, whether I've made it myself or store-bought, you know, it just seems to kind of disrupt the shape and integrity of the garment. So that's why I say, yes, it is technically machine washable. I do not recommend it. A second reason that I also would not recommend it is because machines tend to use very hot water, and if you're like me, you forget to change the water setting on your machine when you just dump in your clothes, and it still can cause felting. Superwashing reduces the risk of felting, but it doesn't prevent it, so I just would not recommend it. But with that said, because this is Superwash wool, it's so much more resilient than just untreated wool. So that's why I can have the heat up high, I can pull it out of the pan, I can flip it over, and as you can see probably in the shot with this camera, that we are not harming the wool at all. Like, it really can take quite a bit. Which is great. So if you're dyeing non-superwash wool, I would not be pulling it up and out of the pan like this. If you watch my episode 1 and episode 2, I'm actually dyeing raw wool roving that is not superwash treated, and you can see how completely different, not only because it's roving, but also because it's not superwash treated, how differently I treat those pans. Okay, so I just added my second to last color. This is a green color. It's really, really light, and it's very subtle. Sometimes like I feel like you don't really even see it in the skein, but it adds just a little bit more, again, dimension, a little bit of coolness to kind of balance out some of these peach spots. But it really does melt into the background, which is great. I also think it tends to split into blue and yellow, and I think that's why you don't really see it as much. So it just adds, again, a different shade of blue and a little bit of yellow that helps to balance some of the yellow that has split out from that aqua color that we speckled. So you can see there are these little patches of bright yellow. There's some there, and that has been split from that last color that we added. So just gonna let this sit, and let's check on our tonal pan over here. Doing really well over here. So we're not 100% exhausted, but we're really close. I mean, that water's, it's pretty see-through. So I'm gonna go ahead and add our next color because we're very, very close. So this is actually just the remainder of the dye of that first color that we added. So it's a little bit more of that stony blue. And this is where it's definitely a bit of trust, because it looks very dark, pretty much black in this pan. And this is something that just took a while of yarn dyeing for me to really figure out how much it is going to lighten up once it has been washed and dried. I mean, I'm sure that you guys see that a lot, like when you do laundry, like a wet shirt always looks like it's so much darker than a dry shirt. So it's that same concept. The water just makes colors look so much darker. So because I want a midnight blue color, it really needs to look black in the pan. But I did not add any black. These are all blue dyes. Just a couple different blue dyes added together at a very high depth of shade. So it's pretty much as dark blue as I can get without it being black. And it's amazing how much it's going to lighten up once you get it washed. So it's not going to be black. It's going to be a wonderful blue. So that just needs to keep soaking. And yeah, so we will check back again. Usually this green dye does not need a lot of time to fix, but I can see this powder looks like it's still kind of hanging out on the surface. So once again, I am going to break away. I'm going to go upstairs for a little bit and probably not do chores, you know, even though I should, but chores are awful. So I'll see you in another 20 minutes. I'm back, and it's time to add our final color. Yes, I cannot believe it. We are all the way at the end. So let's see what we have. Beautiful, beautiful. So this is what I was talking about, but you can see some of this green really just blended into more of the yellow and the blue. It's why I really love this particular green dye. Very subtle. So now I'm going to make sure that I find any spots that are kind of bare or lacking. So I just found this big chunk of middle right here. Look at this big white spot here. I'm going to pull these forward to make sure that I'm getting really good even coverage, because I want to make sure that my whole thing has lots and lots of color. So I'm going to add my final colorway. It's a very, very deep blue. It's actually one of the same blues that is in our tonal color, and that's why they're going to pair together really well, because you're going to have the tonal of the same color and then the speckle. And I'm going to speckle pretty heavy because, again, when this colorway is knit or crocheted up, I want it to be blue. And then you're just going to see all those like little pops and hints of the brighter colors that we layered on kind of come through, peeking through the fabric, but in a really fun way. So let's go ahead, add our final color. So I went pretty heavy. So you're going to get some really nice, sharp, super dark speckles. And then some of these areas you can see where the dye is kind of settling into the water. You'll get a little bit of a washing of blue. It's going to look really pretty. I love this colorway. So let's go ahead and see where we are at with our tonal partner. Tongs. Oh yeah, so this color is pretty much done. I'll show you the water is completely clear. All the dye has been exhausted. We did put quite a bit of dye, there's a tiny bit of dye into this. We did put quite a bit of dye onto this yarn. And so I want to make sure that it is completely fixed because I want a nice wash fast color. We don't really want bleeding or crocking on our hands. So I just gave it a good flip, and I'm going to leave it in here for about another 20 minutes. I like to go for at least 20 minutes past when it's been exhausted. And again, that is just going to ensure that the dye is completely and permanently fixed to this yarn. It should be, because usually once the water is clear, that means it is stuck, it is chemically bonded to our protein fiber. But again, I just like to be just a little extra cautious. So I'm going to keep that in. And this pan, again, is going to need about 20 to 30 minutes, probably a full 30 minutes for that deep dark blue to completely fix to the dye. And then I will, again, heat it for about another additional 20 minutes. I'll turn the pans off and let it come to a slow cool. Some colors actually need some cooler temperatures to completely fix to the yarn. Sometimes yellows, the yellow won't completely exhaust from the water until the water's actually cold. We didn't add yellows, so we shouldn't have that issue today, but that is why I like to actually let them come to a slow cool and get completely down to room temperature before I wash the yarn. Then I soak it in a Eucalyptus lavender soak wash, spin it out, hang it to dry. It needs to dry for about 2 to 3 days, and then I can twist it up into the nice fancy hanks that you see hanging on my grid bowl, and it will be listed in the shop. So hopefully by the time that I'm posting this video, these two colors will be in the shop. I am planning a big shop update of Folksong. I have about like 16 colors that are ready. Folksong is so great for this time of year because it makes nice, thick, plushy, bulky sweaters that are just so cozy. Cardigans, throws, cowls, hats, mittens. It's such a versatile yarn, and I love the big plumpy fabric that it makes. So thank you so much for joining me today in the dye studio, and I'm so glad that I could create something just for you. If you have any questions about yarn dyeing, if there's anything specifically that you wanted to see, a color, a technique, drop it down into the comments, and I can plan out an episode based just on that. So yeah, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel to get updates of whenever my videos go live. I'm going to try to film videos consistently at least every week, if not every other week, and hopefully we can all dye up something beautiful together. Okay, I'm just rambling now, so it's time to cut this off. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Chances are this won't even post before Thanksgiving, so, you know, maybe just a wonderful holiday season. Thanks so much for watching.